Just how serious is this energy crisis that we are in, albeit the markets are not telling you about that because, of course, this is also AI algorithmically manipulated data that's being fed to the masses while reality is very, very quickly going to catch up with us. And the answer to the question of how serious is this is multiple people who are actually paying attention to this saying, no, we're actually at catastrophic levels. This is the most serious situation that the modern world has ever been in, actually. So it's very much time for people to be taking this very seriously and preparing themselves accordingly. What is it that they need to do? Well, someone who's been tracking all of this is Chris Martenson. His expertise is actually energy, a very, very intelligent individual, incredibly well articulated on these matters. And so he's going to be joining us today to discuss exactly what is going on, what the headlines aren't actually telling you, and what it is that people need to do to prepare. And if I can just say something from the outset, which is also echoed at the end of this conversation, by the way, it's if you aren't taking this seriously and doing everything you can to hedge yourself now, it's time to start immediately. It's time to start immediately. And this is not, trying to scare people. This is very much about telling people the truth. We are in a serious crisis. The reality is going to catch up with us, and our ability to thrive through this is going to depend on us, number one, being incredibly informed, and number two, being as prepared as we possibly can along with the people around us. So Chris Martenson is joining us in just a moment after a quick word from the sponsor of this show, who's actually in the business of helping people prepare. And I really, really hope that people pay very close attention to Chris's words, his analysis. Again, incredibly intelligent individual who really knows his stuff. What is coming down the pipeline? What are the numbers actually in terms of energy? What are they likely to do in response to this energy crisis? And by the way, the World Economic Forum has provided us with a hint, which we will discuss throughout this conversation as well. The writing's on the wall, ladies and gentlemen, and here is us trying to sound the alarm as loudly as possible. So please share this interview everywhere. Give it a like. It helps with the exposure. Give us your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe share what you and people that you know are doing to help hedge yourself for the coming years. And again, just please share this information. We want as many people to be as prepared as possible so that they're not caught in a situation where they're depending on the state for their survival. I don't want to see a single person in that position. Coming up, Chris Martenson. Z Media is proud to partner with Aussie businesses that support freedom and believe in you and your family getting the best possible nutrition you can. Stockman Steaks is a third-generation family meat business supplying direct from freedom-loving Aussie farmers with pasture-raised, non-genetically modified, humanely raised local meat. Their meats are guaranteed mRNA-free. That's right, no mRNA in these grass-fed, antibiotic, hormone-free animals. By buying from Stockman Steaks, you'll be supporting Aussie farmers who share your values and are committed to giving you the best quality meat. Head to their store to see their delicious range of carefully selected meat boxes or create your own. Visit stockmansteaks.com.au/Maria. Support businesses that support us and give your family the nutrition they deserve. Chris Martenson, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you coming back on.
Maria, it's a real pleasure to be back here with you today, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise, I just watched your phenomenal interview with Tucker Carlson. I encourage everyone to go and watch that. And it's prompted me to read your Renaissance report in much more detail. And I think everybody needs to read it. In fact, we're going to put a link to it in the description below for everyone to review that. A number of things we need to discuss today. Obviously, the energy crisis. I did a bit of digging into what the World Economic Forum says about it. So we'll touch on that. And also this news about wargaming a draft. So really, really interesting things happening, Chris. First and foremost, in your Renaissance report, you've sort of done an extended alert here, and you've highlighted something which I think is really interesting, which is that a lot of economists are not tying the economy to energy and why this is so important. So can we start there, please?
I'd be glad to, because that's really that's the beginning of the story. It's something I've spent at least 2 decades on, just trying to bring conscious awareness to bringing these two pieces together. And it's really obvious, I think, to everybody once you look at it that way. And I've written books about it. I've got a video series called The Crash Course, which really is just bringing those two E's together, economy, energy. And it's actually pretty simple once you put your mind to it. So we like to think, however, that the economy is this thing over here. And we have a lot of people who specialize in talking about the economy. And they've got formulas and PhDs and a lot of dogma about how economies work. And then you've got energy specialists over here who know a lot about energy. And I'm that generalist I'm bringing these two pieces together. It's this simple. If you gave me a country and you didn't tell me, anything about it, but you told me how much oil it was burning on a yearly basis, I could get within 93% accuracy, tell you exactly how big its economy is. Because the economy is driven by energy, not the other way around. We like to think, oh, if your economy gets bigger, more energy will magically show up, right? And instead, it turns out that any nation's economic vigor, its living standards, its wealthiness is completely defined by how much energy it's consuming and utilizing. Why? Well, if you want to have an economy, what are you doing? Well, economy requires people to do work, right? Either they're delivering goods or services, and work requires energy. And so we can just very simply say the economy requires energy. It seems simple. If you just begin to look out across the world and look at it through that lens, you'll just see energy everywhere. You'll see planes going across the sky and you'll be thinking about jet fuel, and you'll see big ships filled with containers and they're burning bunker fuel or ship fuel. And you'll see cars and trucks all over the roads and they're burning gasoline and diesel. And in every case, Maria, what we're talking about here is something that I think has been lost because, I don't know, it was just, we've had it too good for too long. And so those two things got separated. I'm busy trying to cram them back together. You can't talk about the economy without energy. And what's happened right now is the world has, through war, just taken out a huge chunk of energy. And that's, of course, going to take a huge bite out of the economic side of things.
In this latest article, you spoke about how the agencies, the IEA, for example, began smashing all the hydrocarbons into one messy bucket they now call petroleum. And I know that we discussed this last time that we spoke, but I think it's worthwhile you explaining this again to the viewers about these terms that essentially are creating, I guess, an impression in people's minds that we're doing just fine. We have enough oil. We have enough petroleum, or whatever the case may be. It's just creating a narrative that simply is not the case. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, it's this is something we saw during COVID too, right? Where suddenly we lost what's a vaccine, what's herd immunity, and whenever I see official agencies begin to blur terms that used to be solid and understood, I understand that they're doing that on purpose. They're not doing that because it's helpful in any way, shape, or form. So everybody's heard this. The United States is a net energy exporter, which is true. But what's energy, right? So in this case, they've lumped every single thing that comes out of the ground that you can set on fire into one bucket, and they call it petroleum, right? And so when I was growing up, petroleum and oil were synonyms. Now petroleum apparently means anything that includes crude oil, the black stuff, that gets refined into up to 2,000 separate products, but it could include all these natural gas liquids, which are things like propane, butane, ethane, tasty things. They're awesome, but they're not swappable, right? It's not like I can just decide that I'm going to put butane in my car instead of diesel, right? So that's the thing. It'd be like if I said, hey, let's add up all the food you have on your property. And I go, well, I got the food in my fridge, but termites can eat wood. So let's add the wood up too. And we'll just put it all in one big bucket. Wow, look at all the food I have. Food becomes a useless distinction term at that point in time. It loses meaning. So what do we really care about? We care about crude oil because that's the stuff that we refine into diesel, jet fuel, gasoline, bunch of other products. Those are the pillars of our industrial economy because it requires things moving constantly. So when we look at that, the United States is still a net importer of crude oil. We just are. About 2.5 million barrels a day is what we have to import in order to square the balance on our economic needs here in the United States.
And the sort of story that people are being told regarding Venezuela and the US now having what it needs, getting so much out of Venezuela, you've basically dismantled that entire narrative. Could you explain for our viewers why that's simply not the case?
Sure, Venezuela is a big country. They have two major deposits there. One is very fairly conventional oil, the Mere deposit, Merey, and it's a big field, and it's got typical things you would see on an oil field. You know, you got straws going in the ground, drilling rigs, you know, derricks and producing wells and all of that. It's thick, it's heavy, it comes out. There's about 1.1 million barrels a day that can come out of that field. And then they have this other thing called the Orinoco Belt, which is totally not oil as you would recognize it. It really looks like asphalt underground. It's super thick. It doesn't flow. You couldn't get it out of the ground and put it in a pipeline and move it anywhere. And if you can't put oil in a pipeline, you can't really move it. I mean, you couldn't even even if you could get it into a tank car, you wouldn't be able to get it out again unless you heated the whole tank car up and tipped it over. It's really difficult stuff. So there's a lot of that. And so in order to get more of that, and by the way, the Orinoco Belt has been producing for a while, but it's in bad disrepair under Maduro. A lot of things, you know, really fell apart. And it's going to take maybe $100 billion minimum investment to get that oil field producing again. But the comparable part to that would be maybe the bitumen fields, which is also a very heavy tar-like substance up in Canada, right? And Canada's, you know, safe, stable country. It's got good laws. You know, there's not undergoing violent revolutions all the time. And up there, it took them probably 15 years to get up to about 4.5 million barrels a day. It's doable, but it took tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, and it just takes time, and you build these things out slowly. And so what's the chance of taking that huge reserve? The Orinoco Belt's huge. I think it's like 260 billion barrels of technically recoverable reserves. But hundreds of billions is going to have to be invested there. And then it's going to take years to get that to sort of crawl its way up to successively higher rates of production. And that's if and only if the whole place stays stable, right? And that you have enforceable contracts that remain and don't get, you know, socialized or otherwise stolen in some fashion. So it's tricky. It's not impossible. The idea that we're going to be able to replace on the world stage 12 to 15 million missing barrels that are currently missing out of both Russia and the Middle East with Venezuela, it's not realistic. And that's as polite as I can be.
The math doesn't math.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Hormuz, now we've also got the Bab al-Mandab Strait, which you've said no longer open for business. This is going to severely pinch already strained oil markets. What sort of a pinch are we talking here, Chris?
Well, so pre-war, let's say February 27th, there was an average in all of 2025 of 21 million barrels a day of oil and oil products moving out of the Strait of Hormuz. And then immediately that went to close to zero, and it's been pretty effectively locked down ever since. But there were a couple workarounds here. So Saudi Arabia has an east-west pipeline that goes over to the Yanbu port, bypasses the Strait of Hormuz, and loads up in the Red Sea. And they've been able to get that up to about 4.5 million barrels a day. So we have to deduct that from the 21 that we're missing. Okay, now we're missing, you know, less than that. What's that? 16.5, 17.5. And then also there was another somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million barrels a day coming down through a pipeline that escaped the Strait of Hormuz in Oman. It came out at the port at Fujairah. So that was also able to sneak out a little bit. And then Iraq, for its part, just started loading up trucks with this stuff and driving it north and up and out of the country, going, I think, through Syria into Turkey. So there were these little leakages around that. So the 21 got shut down, but there were some workarounds. The most significant was the Saudi Arabia East-West pipeline loading in the Red Sea. And then the Houthis came out and said, we're going to stop all Saudi-linked tankers. If anybody loaded up, they don't care who it belongs to. If you load it up there, they were going to stop it. And then they shot 2 Saudi tankers and set them on fire and did some significant damage. It's gotten a little less clear since then because apparently 2 Chinese tankers just came out yesterday, and they probably loaded up with Saudi oil. So maybe the Chinese get a special deal. A little unclear. But if they were able to stop all that 4.5 million barrels per day, that is a huge blow to the world energy market system. Yes, some of that could be sailed north, up and come out the Suez Canal, but it's not a perfect workaround, and it would be less than was able to come out through the south through the Bab el Mandeb Strait. And even if you could sneak north, the reason you want to go south is most of those loadings need to go into the Pacific Basin. Japan needs it, India needs it, China needs it. That's where it was going. So now, if they have to go north, well, now they scoot out the Suez Canal. Now they got to take a left and go all the way back around Africa and make the journey. So it adds a month to the whole process, easy. And so that's the issue here is that it looks like we have another oil shock. And I know we're all sort of like, oh, it's been going on a long time. We're all like, oh no, not another one. But Maria, if we just lost 4.5 million barrels, forget everything else. If we had just lost that just 2, 3 years ago, that would have been the biggest shock anybody could have imagined in the oil markets. And now it's just kind of like you get a little shrug. Yes, oil's gone up a little bit. Somebody was banging hard on oil all last night and this morning in the U.S. markets. We seem to be stuck at a very weird place in history right now.
Very weird place because it's clear how much of a crisis this is for anyone paying attention to the numbers. Yet the markets aren't necessarily reflecting that yet. I know that in Tucker's monologue prior to you joining him on that interview, he discussed the sort of possibility that AI, LLMs are reading the language of leaders who keep assuring us that everything is great. And then futures, because futures is basically run by AI, that's why it's showing what it's showing. I mean, this is weird is an understatement, Chris. I wonder how much of how long what I guess the question is, and I wanted to save this for the end, but I wonder how long it will take for reality to catch up with the manipulation that we're seeing, this digital fake reality that's being presented to us.
Yeah, Maria, so I've been a futures trader I did it for a long time, and I understand how the markets work pretty well, but I had to stop doing it somewhere around 2008 because everything that used to be working suddenly stopped working and I couldn't understand it. And with a couple of years of licking my wounds and then looking back, I realized that, oh, I was no longer trading against humans. That was the beginning of the rise of the machines. And there were algorithms out there that first, whenever the Yahoo Finance or whatever, or MSNBC, they go, oh, look at these stock traders. They're all unhappy. And they show guys typically in gold or blue jackets with those pictures are from 20 years ago. If you want to talk about our markets today, the NYSE, the CME with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, where they have the big trading floors, there aren't people on those floors anymore. There's just racks of blinking lights, right? And so what we're up against now is the markets are no longer run by humans. They're run by algorithms that have certain trading strategies, and they do very complicated things. And they're constantly sniffing out with microsecond latencies, like, where's everything going? And one of the things they're incredibly good at doing is just figuring out the direction of things. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world, doesn't matter what the news is necessarily, but if things start going that way, you get all these momentum algorithms that just pile on and off they go. And so what I think has happened is that the powers that be have long ago figured out how to manipulate the markets by using very high leverage points within these markets, right? They don't just come in and sell oil necessarily or buy stocks, but they're going to be doing things where there's a point of leverage that hitches to other points of leverage that hitches to other points of leverage. So they find these little things. I'm sure they have software that knows exactly where the leverage points are. And then you just put a little wiggle here and it becomes a big movement over there. And they've done this for so long that here's an example. So corn, it's a commodity, has futures. And there's a good reason to have futures. You're a corn grower. I'm a corn buyer. I want to sell. You want to sell your corn that's coming due this September. You need the cash now. I want to buy it in September, but I don't want to take it today. So there's a reason to have a futures market. I get it. But if you are a corn producer, right now you're getting exactly the same price for a bushel of corn that you got in 2008. Nominal dollars, not inflation adjusted, same price. And that's insane given all the input cost pressures. I mean, can you imagine if there was a futures market for Ford F-150 trucks and Ford just had to take the price that the futures market set, and the futures market said, sorry, Ford, they actually cost, you can buy and sell them in a paper market for exactly what they cost in 2008.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Ford got a business in a skinny minute, right? And this is why so many farmers are in debt and farmers are going out of business, because there are people, speculators, who it's very profitable for them to cap the price of corn, not in terms of what it actually costs to produce, not in terms of whether that's the right thing for the country, not in terms of any of that, just they make money doing that. And so they've gotten very good at this. This isn't something that just came up with AI, although I think AI could certainly fuel this process. And so we've had several things happen. One, we've had physical intervention in keeping the price down. That's dumping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That was releasing all of the sanctions that had held back a lot of Russian and also Iranian oil off the markets. We had a little flood of that. Well, we still had all the tankers that were sailing around at the time the war started. It took them a month or two to get to destinations. So that was physical inventory that was available. Okay, we ate into all of that. And then two, we had all these endless Trump taco moments, whatever we call them. But, right before markets open on Monday, like Iranians are about to accept another deal. I think we're on our 50th iteration of that right now. And those turned out to, it's always around the market open and close, right? We all know this. We
incredibly
have
transparent. Yeah, it's crazy, actually. Crazy.
Yeah, we're recording this on a Friday, expecting about 5-6 hours we're going to hear about another bombing campaign, right?
Yeah.
By the US.
Yeah.
Because markets will be closed. So that's been going on. And then there's been this mysterious thing that's been happening. And I can tell you just what happened last night. So this is the 24th. This morning at 4:29 in the morning. Okay, overnight future markets for commodities are really thinly traded. Everybody's asleep. Not much happens. There's a little stuff going on there. But for oil, it's usually the volume is somewhere between 50 and 300 contracts. It averages about 150. They're sort of percolating along. And then at 4:29 last night, all of a sudden, 5.1 thousand, 5,100 contracts got dumped in a single 1-minute window, just all of a sudden, and it just drove the price down. And in the overnight markets, it's like that would be like showing up at a farmer's market, but there's only 8 people there who want to buy eggs, and you show up with 200 dozen eggs, right? It's like there aren't enough people, there aren't enough bids in that moment for that. So what does it do? It just crushes the price. Now, when you see that, that tells you that somebody's not legitimately in there trying to get the best price for selling oil. I'm a producer. I woke up at 4:30. I have insomnia. I'm like, you know what? I'll hedge some of my future production by selling all of it instantly. You would never do that. That would be completely stupid. If you were getting the best price for it, you'd stretch those out carefully so you didn't move the markets and you got the best price. When you watch those moments where you see these enormous bid crushing, they're called bid crush, they crush the bid stack, right? Just like it just whatever bids were sitting there, you just smash through them all. And then once that happens, well, then all the algos wake up and go, oh, is that what's happening? And off they run. But those 5.12 thousand contracts, since 1,000 barrels of contract, represented 5 million barrels of oil being dumped into the market in a single minute.
Wow.
And of course, that just makes things go down, right? So that's what happens. And so I've been watching this long enough to say, okay, somebody is also in here who very much wants to see the price of oil go down. Could that be the Trump presidency? Sure.
What sort of level of coordination would it take to do what you just described?
Well, not a lot if they were doing it illegally, which would be called wash trading. So if I wanted to do this, here's what I would do. I would set up, I have a firm, I have a trading desk. It already sells oil. But here's the problem. If I sell 5 million barrels of oil and somebody buys them and wants delivery, and I have to deliver in a month or two, I'm hosed. So what I would do is I would set up a second company over here, and they would be absorbing, or a second entity, they would be absorbing. I'd be selling, they'd be, absorbing them down here. So that's called a wash trade, when you sell to yourself so that you can move the price of something, but it would be very effective. That's what I would do. I don't know that that's happening, but to Tucker's point, he was disturbed because he thought markets were these free and transparent things, but nobody ever explains what happens in these moments. You can talk to the SEC, the CFTC, they just shrug and say, oh, it's proprietary, it's confidential. Like it's anything but transparent what's happening in that moment, but somebody knows.
Sure, somebody knows. Sure they do. This kind of speaks to this point that you raised recently, which is the US oil reserve is at a 40-year low, but the government says there's still plenty of breathing room. This is from Morningstar. Energy Department says operational minimum for the storage caverns is about 70 million barrels, a level far lower than oil industry estimates. Crude stockpiles in the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve have fallen to a more than 40-year low. So what we're witnessing and correct me if I'm sort of not articulating this completely correctly, but there is a manipulation happening at the same time, perhaps, a serious level of coordination going on, at the same time being assured that these critically low levels are actually okay. We're at critically low levels all over the world, but we're still being assured that this is fine and it's not going to cause any issues for us. Yet again, reality is going to catch up with the math.
So this is important because oil is just not like any other commodity out there. It is non-negotiable. It's not, can't replace it. So it's not substitutable. So when the DOE comes out and say that, that's actually a deeply irresponsible thing they came out and said. So I looked into their own reports and dug through them and found out how the Strategic Petroleum Reserve actually worked. So quick little background on this. It's 4 sites all along the Louisiana and Texas coast. And they have 60 individual salt caverns, which are underground, just basic holes in the ground that they filled with oil. And the way they get the oil out is they pump water in to the bottom of the salt cavern and it floats the oil up because oil is lighter than water and they push it out. Okay. And it turns out that because we set these things up back in 1974 after the Arab oil crisis, we just took the first caverns we could. These are called early storage reserves, ESRs. And there's a bunch of them, but you add them all up, they hold about 130 million barrels. The fun thing about these ESRs is that they were not designed to hold oil. They were just old things left over because Morton Salt or whoever took salt out of the ground. And because of that, they have this really weird, funky geometry underground. Point being that once you use them, you drain them, they collapse and it's game over. So you can only use them once. So for the DOE to say, oh, we can drag this down to 70 is actually wrong because you would collapse and ruin about 130 million barrels of future storage, but also you wouldn't be able to get all that oil out because these things are going to collapse as you pull too much out. The second thing that's a little off about this is that the minimum you could take all these down to is about 10%, and that gives them their 70 million because the overall capacity of the SPR is 713 million barrels. So 10% of that, 71. Call it 70. Taking it down to there has never been done. Their own documents say it's kind of ill-advised. You really wouldn't want to do that unless you're really desperate. So what that DOE release should have said is, hey, if we're completely stupid about this and we're willing to risk permanently impairing a significant portion of our future storage, and we're willing to risk damaging the entirety of our SPR, yeah, we could take it down to 70 million barrels, right? I don't even think that's so. Like, really, what are we going to do when we face a real emergency? So the SPR is there, Maria, because let's say we have this tropical storm, Bertha, right now. It's in the Gulf. And so they fly all the people defensively off of the rigs and they shut in oil production. And we always, when we get hurricanes, we get these big drops in production of crude oil that last, days, weeks, or even months, depending on the severity of the hurricane. That's what the SPR is supposed to be for, to help, buffer those moments when we have like either a weather event or we get into some big war where we're going to need that to conduct war operations. So to drag it all the way down so that we can be in a position to mostly sell it to the rest of the world. About half of the SPR has been sold abroad. It's just staggers my mind to think that we've gotten to that level of incompetence.
Yeah.
Lack of recklessness with regard to national security. I don't know how to put it yet. I'm still struggling.
I want to get into a few theories with you in a moment, but before I get there, you in your article, Renaissance Report, you've spoken about risking the economic collapse. We spoke about this petroleum term, and you've said here we have to perform the extra step of backing these non-oil hydrocarbons out of the equation. When we do, we find that the world was producing and consuming 86 million barrels of oil per day. With the recent closures of the Strait and the Bab el Mandab Strait and Russia's losses, the world is missing approximately 12 million barrels per day. You've done some math here. So that would place the world's current oil output at the same level it was at in 2011. And so that's a graphic there for everyone to see. So what's the problem here? Well, in 2011, the global economy was 36% smaller. Now, That is, I want to ask you, have you taken into account in those calculations the current data centers, also the ones in construction, and what their demand, their energy demand is going to be? Or is that without that part of the equation?
It's totally separate, and I think it's fair to keep them separate because there's one other molecule we're leaving out of here, which is natural gas, and that's totally separate from any of the petroleum discussions. Most of the data centers, I mean, they all run on electricity. If you have nuclear, that would be great, but for the most part, what we're doing in the United States is we're funding those, powering those with natural gas. That's a whole other story, and it's equally as alarming when you dig into the data. You're like, is anybody adding these numbers up? Like, where are we going with this? Because it's really troubling aspect of this because they're super hungry, data hungry, these data centers, right? The power consumption is just unbelievable, right? So just to put in context, the power consumption of Denver, decent sized city, is about a gigawatt. We're putting in data centers that are 5 gigawatts. The one that Kevin O'Leary was proposing was 11 gigawatts. It's like we're talking about putting in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 Denvers of power consumption just to feed this little box in the desert that makes, cute cat videos and waste heat. But on that story, we don't have the natural gas that I can see very much longer to do that. And it's a puzzling part of the story because if we're throwing all of our eggs into the AI basket, we have to win that first. We have to beat China. We got to get God in a box first. We're going to use these things forever, and so if we would have a comprehensive strategy to say, okay, how are we going to both keep the lights on in Cincinnati and keep the data centers happy at the same time? How are we going to do that? There would be a plan. Maria, I can't find that plan anywhere. I go to FERC, I go to the DOE. I've been all over the place. I'm like, who's adding these numbers up? Nobody's adding them up at this point. And if they are, they're not sharing them with us. And that means it's not a good story, usually.
Usually. So yesterday, President Trump said regarding data centers, quote, "You can't fight it, you have to go with it." Um, uh, Challenge accepted. But the what I find interesting about this, so obviously the construction of the data centers, which there are so many planned, require energy, and they want more and more and more of these. And that's not the running of them; it's the gasoline required to transport materials to these data centers. It's all of the energy required during their construction. So my question is, and this is what I'm trying to work out, Chris, and maybe we don't have an answer yet, but what it looks like to me, and we've touched on this last time, is they're going full bore with the AI revolution nonsense simultaneously at the time of a major energy crisis. It doesn't make sense to me, other than they start stripping energy rights from the people in order to facilitate this beast that they're building. Can we see warning signs of that?
We don't have to wait long because we've already seen them, right? If you pull up a chart or look at national electricity prices, they've just been spiking higher and higher and higher. And so what that really is everybody who has an expanded electricity bill right now is subsidizing or paying for these data centers, right? So we're paying for our own surveillance architecture at this point. That trend is going to continue and it's going to get a lot worse, particularly when you look at the fact that our electricity grid hasn't been upgraded in a long time. The $1.5 trillion that we gave to the bankers during the GFC, maybe we could have spent some of that on ourselves. Right now, we have a defense bill that's supposed to rack us up to 1.5 trillion because I think blowing things up overseas is more important than giving ourselves a robust, stable, cheap, and reliable electricity grid or other infrastructure improvements. So these are just decisions the nation makes, but it's very clear at this point we have not been spending on upgrading our electricity grid. And the NERC is out there routinely just screaming at the top of their lungs that we're in deep trouble. We've seen grid instability show up throughout the Southeast. We've seen it in the PJM. We're starting to get like the staticky warning signs that we're already overstressing our electricity system. And you know what? It's not slowing down the data centers even slightly at this point. We're just slapping them in willy-nilly. So how are they going to power themselves? Most of them are going to power themselves with on-site natural gas, electricity plants. And those are massive. And so, yes, there's going to be this competition at some point, easy to predict within the next couple of years. We're going to see this competition, which is like, does the data center get the natural gas? Are we going to put it to LNG and send it to Europe? Or do the fine people in Cincinnati get their share of it. Already we've been seeing signs that the lowest totem pole dweller in this story is the residential consumer.
Yeah.
They have the fewest bargaining rights. They don't have any really collective bargain. They're not powerful. And so we're already seeing contracts getting written that basically are exclusive contracts between the data centers and the natural gas suppliers. And those are going to take highest precedence in the contract scheme.
Yeah, Lake Tahoe was told, the residents of
Right.
Lake Tahoe were told, sorry, you got no more energy as of next year. We need it for the data center. So, we're already seeing examples of this. And the reason I bring this up right now, Chris, is because obviously there is a correlation here. This is all sort of Agenda 2030-esque. And when yesterday, President Trump made some statements about how big tech was going to provide, was going to provide assurances that they were going to supply their own power. They were going to build plants and then that would feed back to the people and actually lower their energy costs. And I mean, anyone who believes this, seriously, it has been lobotomized. But you had all these sort of influencers out there assuring people, oh, look, guys, data centers are okay now because of this. And I actually went and read the Ratepayer Protection Pledge, which there's no laws in place. And even if there were, who has the confidence that big tech would be held accountable if they didn't do what they said anyway? They let them get away with whatever benefits the state and big tech, which are just one beast. But it actually says, quote, these companies will build, bring, or buy the new generation resources and electricity needed to satisfy their energy demands. Keyword buy, because that's exactly what's happening to Lake Tahoe. So, okay, big tech, it needs this energy. They buy their way in, and then the residents are just told, sorry, no more electricity for you. This codifies, if this pledge means anything, it codifies their ability to keep doing that. We've already seen BlackRock buying up, creating a monopoly on energy companies. So this is, for me, what this picture spells, Chris, is there is going to continue being this aggressive push. I don't know whether the war is for that purpose or not. Maybe it's just by default helping out with this. This push to continue stripping resources from people, tokenizing their entire existence, including their access to energy dependent on their behavior. I mean, I can't see how else they're going to manage this energy crisis other than the people suffer. Does that sound like a plausible theory to you?
Well, I think it's a decent observation of how things have been operating, right? So we saw it during the great financial crisis, right? So, so sorry you lost your home, tough break on that. Meanwhile, we were bailing out to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, all the big companies, because it'd be a shame if Goldman Sachs took a quarterly loss or, AIG had to lick their wounds for a bit. So we've already seen that, right? So this is one of the great things we have to sort of dismantle, this idea, do you want socialism or capitalism, as if that's, there's a choice there. We don't have capitalism, right? Capitalism would allow everybody to take their lumps equally and, let it all sort itself out. We don't do that. We have capitalism for the poor and socialism for the rich. And I don't know what we would call that, come up with a new name for it, but that's been the model over and over and over again. It didn't just happen during the great financial crisis. We saw that same behavior in 2000. We saw it in 1998 with the long-term capital management bailout. We saw it in 1994 with this corporate bond bailout. We saw it with the Greenspan put in 87. We saw it with the Lincoln savings and loan, the whole 9 yards, right? It's the model we have. And so you're exactly right. I don't make predictions. I extrapolate. Like if the ball's flying to left center field, I think that's where it's going to land, right? So if what we're seeing right now, the people are going to shoulder the losses, and the poorer you are, the worse it's going to be. And our system's going to shrug and say, gosh, that's tough. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps, do the best you can. And meanwhile, all of the benefits of all of this are going to be accruing to a smaller and smaller and smaller group of people. And that's just trend extrapolation. That's no prediction. That's going to carry on. But that creates a really unstable system. People ultimately do not like structurally unfair systems. They breed resentment, right? And it's very clear those resentments are building. And there's a lot of ways to express that resentment, right? You look at the number of white men out of the workforce. Well, they're not working. That's a form of passive resentment. I'm out, not going to lean in and work hard at this point in time. So eventually those sorts of imbalances and injustices.
There's also companies saying we're not going to hire the white man. We're going to hire, every other race. So there's that too. But yes, please go on.
No, it's absolutely part of it. And that also adds to the resentment, right? So But we're in a deeply structurally unfair system at this point in time, right? And the race is on. And all of this comes back to, like, if I said, Chris, what's the headwater of the Nile? It's the fact that the Federal Reserve for the past 40 years has been operating our system of money fraudulently. And what do I mean by that? To me, I would commit a serious fraud if I could reach into everybody's bank account tonight and take $10 out of it, right? How does the Fed do that? Well, they print all this money, they give it to Wall Street, they give it to the federal government, and so they've printed that money they print up. It's got real purchasing power. If the Fed printed $1 billion and put it in my bank account, I'd have real purchasing power. That's true when wherever they put it. So they're printing up real purchasing power, but this is an accounting identity. Purchasing power doesn't just come out of thin air. Where does it come from? Well, they had to nibble at the purchasing power of everybody else who'd already worked, already saved in the past, had already, taken their life energy and put it in a direction, accumulated excess, stored it in a bank account, put it somewhere. And so that's fraudulent. And so the Fed has been very, very fraudulently enriching and enhancing the enrichment of an increasingly smaller group of people. And right now, if you look at the wealth and I'm using this term carefully, the 0.00001%, 4 zeros, 0.00001%. If you just took that class of people in this country, they have about as much wealth that equates to about 12% of the national income. The robber barons of the early 1900s, they really overdid it. They made it all the way to 6%, the pikers by today's standards, right? So we have this incredible wealth gap, and AI is just going to absolutely put that on steroids. It's going to remove a lot of jobs. I don't know what people are going to do if we don't derive our meaning and purpose from what we do. And all of the benefits of that are going to increasingly be printed up and handed to a very, very small group of people. And that's the path we're on.
It
I don't know
is.
how we get off it.
And the World Economic Forum, I thought this morning I have to look at what they're talking about in relation to how the world is going to manage this, because they've pretty much, they're the best prediction market if you want to know where the world is heading, because they're telling you this is how it's going to be, and it just so happens to always follow the blueprint they lay out. And so I had to look at what are they saying? How are countries responding to this historic energy shock? And of course, they are following the IEA 10-point plan, essentially, which is work and study from home, return back to indefinite lockdowns, which is, a recommendation that the Melbourne experiment made, if people recall that. I'll just tell you quickly, Chris, we did this report a little while ago. It was done by Monash University in Australia. They called it the Melbourne experiment. Essentially, and I'll just paraphrase here, they colluded with the UN to turn Melbourne, which was the longest lockdown city in the West, into a quote unquote living lab experiment, which they said should continue and will continue past COVID, because locking people down is really great for climate change, and we're gonna actually use this model indefinitely for the whole world. It's a really damning report. As soon as we did the report, Monash took it down off their website. You can't find it on their website anymore, but I have the documents nonetheless. They are so this was the model that the whole universe is supposed to follow indefinitely, and this particular crisis is thrusting us into that. So work and study from home, limit cooling in buildings. We've already seen New York start talking about that. Promote public transportation because they don't want you driving. Restricting government travel. Well, what does that mean? That means increasingly you have the government less involved with the people and more of that sort of technocratic control. You have mandating price caps and providing subsidies. Some countries are doing that. Launch nationwide energy saving campaigns. So, I mean, the writing's on the wall where this is all going, Chris. And again, whether all of these wars are orchestrated or not, they're going to use them to achieve Agenda 2030 goals ultimately.
They seem to have accidentally overlooked banning billionaires from having mega yachts and private planes. Did you skip past that part somehow?
It's not. I don't know. It must be an error. I'll write to them and see if they can add it
slight
in.
oversight. It always shows up as you're going to have to eat bugs and take cold showers and not travel so much. That's what it always comes down to. It never comes down to looking at really where the true profligate waste of energy happens to be. They could have easily said, oh, yeah, the U.S. military is the number one consumer of these fossil fuels in the US. Maybe they should dial their energy back, right? That never comes through in these reports. It's always about that. So I do wonder. So here, look, February 28th, we did the decapitation strike, killed the equivalent of the Pope in Iran, plus a bunch of leaders and then some school kids, and, just got the whole thing started. And the Strait of Hormuz has been closed down. It's the world's worst energy shock. Somehow, Trump keeps saying that Iran wants a deal. We all want a deal. We'd love to get the strait open again. But the actions never square up to those words. The actions are always to keep this thing simmering along, keep the strait closed, keep poking, keep prodding, just make sure the whole thing, the strait stays closed. I go by actions, not words. Okay. On March 2nd is when the Ukraine, air quotes, Ukraine, because they did this with a lot of help and assistance on targeting from NATO and the US, started hitting Russian oil refineries and depots very successfully. And as of 3 days ago, they had hit at least once every single major refinery in Russia. The refining capacity in Russia is down by about 50%. Sure, they'll repair it. Since then, also, we've watched the Ukrainian drones start to hit the Wildberries distribution centers, which is the equivalent of Amazon distribution centers. Like they have one in Atlanta. It's massive. If that caught on fire and got burned to the ground, a whole lot of people aren't getting packages, and a whole lot of, Amazon partners probably go bankrupt because their inventory got toasted. So we're seeing a really severe energy and economic set of attacks against Russia that we're facilitating, right? And so you look at that 1-2 punch and you say, oh, okay, somebody is really trying to get the world in an energy crisis. And I'm sure you're right, because again, this is trend extrapolation, and they already have the documents sort of outlining what we'll do if things get worse from a shortage standpoint. And what we're going to do is we're going to have to lock you all down. I think that's what they're going for. Here's my concern. The economy is not a controllable thing. It's what we call a complex system. And complex systems have emergent behaviors, not predictable behaviors, just emergent. Like we don't even know how to calculate what we would call the three-body problem. Like if you have two things in space orbiting around each other, got the math, can calculate it. You throw a third body in there, we can't calculate anything anymore, right? Just three moving parts and like, I don't know, it's kind of mysterious. And that's the world we live in. And so our economy is an infinity of moving parts, all interrelating with each other. And the way the economy is supposed to work is we have these things called price signals. So if water, because Katrina hits, suddenly becomes $20 a bottle in New Orleans, price gouging, no, that creates a price signal that very shortly people will figure out how to load trucks and drive them there, and the price will come down again, because we need those price signals to operate. That's how business works. That's how decisions get made at households, corporations, states. And they're breaking that. And I think they can control it this time because they've got their God-in-a-box AI. This time we can do it. It's like communism on steroids. Better crop reports this time than the Soviets had. We'll be able to do it. I think that's what they're going for here. And my concern is that too much hubris, little short on understanding how the world actually works because they're a little too insulated from, real work and real humans. And so they're going to break it. And I worry that here's the other thing we can know about complex systems. Once you break them, it's really hard to get them back to their original state, if not impossible. They might break our economy. It kind of fractures to half of its former vigor, and nobody can quite figure out how to get it back to its prior vigor because too many things broke at once and we don't understand them at this stage. That's the concern.
So is the solution just total war and we're determined for this? And I'm unfortunately spotting a lot of signals that would suggest that. And I just want to bring up this article which just dropped from the Military Times. Selective Service System wants to wargame the draft. So fearing that its new plans for the US military draft pool won't work, the Selective Service System wants to create a computer simulation to test scenarios for its national mobilization. The, quote, readiness simulation project comes as the US government is about to change its draft registration system. So a bit of history there for anyone who isn't aware. This was announced, I think, earlier this year or last year. It was the government is going to begin to automatically register men 18 to 26 for the draft in December. So now while that's happening, or ahead of that happening rather, now they're going to be running this simulation for a draft. What are your thoughts here, Chris?
Well, that's disappointing. Obviously, my point of view on this whole thing is that clearly Israel was very instrumental in getting Trump and the United States dragged into this war. They've been trying forever. I think I wrote a report in 2008 or nine warning about an Iran war because I was reading all the signals and somebody was trying very hard at that time, I think, to get the United States involved. And then a few years later, it happened again. And a few years, I probably have 5 reports going back warning about an Iran war because I was reading the signals and I could see somebody's trying to drag us in, right? And you can tell because you get these sudden, like, this is how you know. You open up the New York Times and they talk about how there's this horrible condition for women in Iran, and it's because of these terrible people. There's this dehumanization campaign, right? So you watch that, and then you read the rumblings, and you see, military transports happen, and so I saw it over and over again that somebody's been trying to get us into war with Iran. Okay, finally happened, right? And you remember in the aftermath of 9/11, General Wesley Clark said, 7 countries, 5 years. Iran was one of the remaining countries on that list. And surprise, here we are. Okay. So once that got kicked off, this is a problem. My friend Michael Yan says, look, wars do 2 things. They grow and they grow out of control.
Yeah.
So for now, it still feels like we could, if we wanted to, maybe pull back. It would be a huge ego hit to Trump. We'd be taking some L's that we're not ready to, face as a nation, I guess, or whatever. But the alternative is that we could cross a line here and then something magic happens. The war grows out of control. It's no longer under anybody's control. It has a life of its own. It goes where it's going to go. It finishes however it finishes once it's burnt all of the avenues out and reaches exhaustion. That's how these things go. My concern is that when the United States is busy helping or directly responsible for causing all this oil to be lost, principally from the Pacific Basin, everybody over there who has an interest in this suddenly realize what decision is China going to eventually have to make here? They can't afford to have the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and Russia all be not producing oil for the next year. They just can't have that. So China will have to at some point directly intervene. And, you pick what that means. I hope it doesn't mean warships, but they have a lot of options that I don't think people are considering, such as we could wake up one morning and China could say, until y'all have some sort of like durable regime change in the United States, we're no longer conducting business with you. We're turning all the ships around. We're not sending you anything, right? Our economy would collapse in a matter of months if that happened because, too many things that they make that are vital. They could say, oh, we're getting rid of all our treasuries and we're just isolating ourselves from you. Or, we no longer conduct trade in US dollars. You're going to have to pay us in something else. If you want these things to continue flowing, they have a lot of options up to and including, tangling it up with us kinetically, militarily. But I don't think they want to do that. We don't want that to happen. I hope nobody wants that to happen because China's already won that war, as far as I'm concerned. They have more ships than we have. They have more missiles. They have more manufacturing. They have better logistics. So that's how you win war, logistics and manufacturing, typically. So with all of that said, at some point, though, I think Russia, who already considers the United States or the West more generally to be non-agreement capable, we're not even negotiation capable, like they don't trust anything. Someday we might wake up and Russia says, oh, that's it. We're no longer shipping energy products to anybody but a select few countries, and everybody else can go pound sand. These are the kinds of things, Maria, that once those happen, once that Rubicon gets crossed, I don't know how you turn this off. I don't know how you go back until it burns itself out. And if that happens, that 36% decline in global economy, that's baked in the cake. That's Great Depression was about a 25% decline in select areas, right? Not worldwide. This would be worldwide, and it would be at least 36%. And what's different between now and, say, even the Great Depression or the Arab embargo of 73, 74? Well, now this time it's with extra debt and extra leverage and a big old pile of derivatives, all of which is just kind of a janky sort of a financial arrangement. But here we are, and so that's the concern.
I actually think President Trump might share your concerns here. He's just made a statement about an hour before we started recording.
Mm.
He's threatened China and Russia if they provide material support to Iran, it would be very bad for them. So he's addressed here basically that President Xi assured Trump that under no circumstances would they be giving or selling weapons to Iran. And that statement included Chinese companies. Considering our relationship, I take him at his word. And besides, I'm doing him very big favors also. Interesting, because China rigged the 2020 election or something, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
likewise,
Mm.
President Putin, despite the horrible war going on in Ukraine, told me that he would not sell weapons to Iran. He understands that I do not sell weapons to Ukraine, but to NATO countries. I mean, semantics. Anyway, they pay full price, and how those weapons are distributed, I have no idea. Therefore, two major countries that people speak of often in terms of Iran are, in my opinion, not participating. If they did, it would be very bad for them. Now, that could mean a couple of things. It could mean that, yeah, actually they are participating. We just don't want to admit that. Or it could be a bit of a threat, like, don't even think about it. I've, for a very long time, said obviously these countries have interests in Iran, and in the Middle East, and it's going to be impacting them significantly. Would they be able to remain superpowers in their own right? Without the Strait? But, would they be able to survive, basically? Sure. And I guess as the entire world goes down, then we all go down together. And they would still be better off than other countries. My point is that I foresee that their interests there are going to eventually, if not already, pull them into this war. Chris, have you seen any evidence? I mean, there's been rumors that China is perhaps providing support to Iran behind the scenes, maybe with intel, satellite imagery, all of this sort of stuff. Do you think that Trump is preempting that they might, or basically this is because they already are?
Well, I'd be super surprised if they aren't already. I mean, we've all seen the reports and the rumors. There's a big Chinese spy ship out there floating around. We've seen pictures of that. There've been plenty of reports, although I haven't seen any direct video myself of Chinese big heavy transports landing in Tehran, delivering something. But beyond all that, it would be absolutely unthinkable that Russia and China wouldn't be involved in some way, shape, or form, because of course they get to test out their systems against our systems, and that's like almost impossible to resist. And in Russia's case, of course, it's perfectly well known that when the CIA was over there in forward spotting posts, that we're providing telemetry data, satellite data to Ukraine. We're providing weapons. We provided them with HIMARS missiles. We provided them with everything, right? Tomahawks, Patriots, you name it. So that's not actually true what Trump said, that, oh, we just sell it to NATO, and if they give some, we don't know, hands off. That's absolutely not true. One does not just transfer a Patriot system. It's not like it's just like I'm selling a Beanie Baby and you bought it. Like, these things have codes. They will not operate unless they are properly allowed to operate, right? So they have parameters on them, of course. So this whole idea that Russia is just supposed to sit there and absorb us attacking them directly, indirectly, and then wouldn't return the favor that's just not how the world works, typically. So, and what do we had? I don't know that they got delivered, but it was, I don't know, 3-4 months ago that China made a deal to provide Iran with the CM-102 missiles, which are, supersonic anti-ship missiles. I don't know if that deal actually went through, but of course they're going to be providing material support like that, and it's to be expected. So for Trump to come out and say that after just having accused China of manipulating our 2020 elections, which is infuriating to me. If you actually are familiar with how the election went down and where the actual flaws were, that's really kind of an abrasive statement, to be polite. So, yeah, of course they're providing support. So the question is, where do they draw the line in the sand? But my model for this, Maria, has been that sooner or later, Russia and China, they're going to have a closed door meeting. They're going to go, the United States is kind of like a rabid dog. Let's just hope it kills itself. We'll just back up, right? But at some point, you may have to intervene more directly. And so, as I mentioned, China has an interest here, not just an interest. China is the number one importer of oil in the world by a very wide margin.
Yes.
And so it's their oil imports that are being impacted by all of this. And so, of course, they have a direct interest in this, because if you cut somebody's oil off, you are creating a direct economic cutting of the stool legs out from under them. And they know that. We know that. Everybody knows that. And so this is going to reach a breaking point unless it stops really soon. I don't see any signs of that though yet.
I don't either, and I know we're a little bit over time, but I just would like to get your views on sort of where you actually see this heading realistically. I can't see any signs of this slowing down, and we've been tracking the headlines sort of out of the UK. I mean, the new PM gets installed, he's immediately like, "Yep, we're going to help out with the Iran war." So it looks like more and more countries are very much invested in this continuing. And of course, you have the UK that's been putting out headlines about how we're preparing for war with Russia. We're preparing for World War III. If you refuse conscription, you're going to be shamed. Actually, there's going to be consequences. I mean, the
Mm.
headlines are quite clear where this is heading. So I'm curious as to your realistic take, and really, if you can give people a little bit of a spiel of what they should be preparing for.
Well, first off, there's just going to be much higher energy prices coming down the road, and that may lead into actual shortages, in which case we'll have to get in some kind of rationing program, right? Somebody somewhere is going to have to make decisions about who gets to use it and why. The normal way you would do that is with market rationing. If the price of jet fuel triples from here, airline tickets go up, and then people decide if they can afford that, and airlines trim back flights, and that's how it would work. Alternatively, you get a government inspired by its AI, because they know better than everybody now, telling us which routes stay open and which don't, and that'll be the usual mess. So I don't. First, everybody should just be preparing for much higher fuel prices, and the derivative of that, unfortunately, is that that's going to lead to economic contraction. So everybody ought to be just building up a reserve buffer, financial reserve buffer. What I counsel all the time is you look at all this stuff going on in the world, and then to the best of your ability, build up buffers in your system. So for me, that means I've got solar panels, I've got batteries, I've got an electric car because now I can at least charge it straight off of my solar panels, which is better than nothing. Actually, I like the car more than I thought I was going to. Got it within a few weeks of this war breaking out. And so that's sort of like on my own energy basis, I'm going to be able to at least keep my freezers running and have the well pump come on and
Yep.
have some lights on, right? So to me, that's important. And I'm doing that because of the data center, because of the increasing expense of electricity where I live, because of all kinds of reasons. But also, this war could really introduce some systemic fragility. Food. Everybody, I've recently re-upped my alert system where I used to say everybody should have 2, 3 months food on hand. I've dialed that up to a year, just because that creates extra buffer in the system. And after that, it gets complicated quickly depending on your circumstance. But for me, what that means is, I have extra spare parts for things. I've looked at the things that we get from China almost exclusively and decided which of those I'd rather just have some extras on hand for. I have a farm, so I've got the need for hydraulic fluid and certain components for the tractor and the excavator and the skid steer. So I've bought all of those, particularly lubricants. I could see lubricants getting in real short supply going forward, because we used to get a lot of our high specialty lubricants out of the GTL facility in the Rosslaufen side of the Qatar field, and that's shut down at the moment. So that's just kind of stuff like, oh my gosh, what do I need in my life, with the understanding that you can't possibly keep all of it. You're gonna have to
Right.
you're gonna lose some soldiers in this fight. Like, okay, I'll use a clothesline instead of a dryer. I mean, we're all gonna have to make those decisions at some point. If this goes this direction, I really hope it doesn't. But right now, I'm about as concerned as I've ever been, and I tend to the side of caution on these things anyway. But I really, it feels like this has a directionality to it that's unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah. I echo your sentiment, Chris. Have been practicing the same thing in my life for a while now, because I've seen the writing on the wall. And, the one practical thing that I've offered people is to have practice, maybe not full days, start off with a couple of hours, as though the grid went down. How would you actually
Mm.
live? If there weren't any supermarkets open, what would you do? What would you do with the items that you have? I actively plan to cook with really limited things so that I get myself in the practice of doing that, because you can't go to the gym and lift 100 pounds straight away. You have to start off slow. And so I actually am advising people to just have little practice runs, because if a crisis hits, and I think it will be an extended crisis that we're just sort of, conditioned into, you are going to be much better trained and less fearful, and better equipped. The more prepared that you are, the less fearful you are. So that is really, really sound advice from you, Chris. I want to direct everyone, again, we're going to link this in the description below, but direct everyone to Peak Prosperity. Well worth a subscription. As you can see, Chris is just a wealth of knowledge, and really, really, I just want to thank you, Chris, for all the information that you're putting out there. You're helping people like me, certainly, and I'm sure our viewers prepare accordingly. So we're very grateful for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate those kind words. And if I could, I just really would, wherever you get your information from, I think everybody needs to begin preparing as if these things might come to pass. The odds are catastrophically above zero at this point in time. And it's going to really impact people's lives. And so I just want to help people become prepared and resilient and build those buffers up, because this too shall pass. And then everybody who's in a good solid state and hasn't been totally ground down by whatever bottleneck is coming our way, we'll be the ones who are going to be in a position to help our neighbors, to help rebuild, to be in a strong stance instead of a weakened stance, to be, offering help, not needing help. And I think that's really important. So for everybody who's sort of up for that challenge, I think that's the right way to look at this.
Speaking to my soul, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Wishing you all the best, and I'm sure we'll speak in the near future again. God bless you.
I hope so. Thank you. God bless you.
The New World Order has openly declared war on the free people of the world, and now they're telling us to expect catastrophic cyber attacks over the next 2 years. Weather events, no power, grids down, mobile cell services out. Contact your loved ones anywhere, anytime with the satellite phone store. The Bivy is a revolutionary GPS-based device which allows you to send SMS messages via your phone even if you have no mobile or cell service. Galileo will ensure you always stay in contact with Z Media, other trusted information sources, and your loved ones that can update you in real time in the event of an emergency. Don't be caught out and unprepared for the unprecedented times we are living in. Stay 10 steps ahead through secure, encrypted communication. Visit sat123.com/Maria and prepare yourself and your loved ones now.